The 2026 World Government Summit, held alongside the World Laureates Summit, is currently underway in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. The summit, hosted under the theme Shaping Future Governments, brings together governments, international organizations, thought leaders, as well as private sector executives from across the globe to advance international cooperation. Speaking during one of the sessions, Patrick J. McGinnis, author of Fear of Missing Out, posed a pointed question. He asked, are governments leading with a clear strategy, or are they merely reacting to FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, and FOBO, which is the fear of a better option in an increasingly fast-changing world? And he now joins us on the line to unpack this further. A very good afternoon to you, Patrick. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Thank you so much, Thami. It's great to be here.
What is it that led you to ask this question? It's a very probing, it's a self-reflective, introspective question that can also often put governments at a point of vulnerability. What drove you to this point of asking this?
Well, it is a very human question. And at the end of the day, our governments are comprised of people. And as the person who coined the term, invented the term FOMO, I see FOMO everywhere I look. And my role in my work is really trying to explain to people that FOMO isn't something frivolous, or FOBO isn't something frivolous. It is at the root of decision making. And if we identify it in places, we actually do have the tools to address it. So it's important for us to look for it, spot it, and then determine how we can make better decisions as a result.
Perhaps let's start with the basics here. Let's backtrack a little bit and understand what these two concepts really mean and how they exhibit themselves. So if you could break for us FOMO, the fear of missing out, and FOBO, the fear of a better option, what those actually mean and how they manifest themselves.
Absolutely. First of all, FOMO it's a psychological phenomenon in which we perceive opportunity, something good, and then we compare ourselves to others. We see them doing that thing. And as a result, we are tempted to pursue this thing, and it changes our behavior. And so what happens when we have FOMO is that we are convinced that we want to do something. But the problem is we may not actually want to do that thing. We're just doing it because other people are. So we think about it in terms of parties and social media, but it could be regulating AI. Or it could be entering into a cryptocurrency regime. It plays out in that kind of way. At the same time, FOBO is fear of a better option. The idea there is that you have acceptable options in front of you, but because you're looking for the perfect option, you delay decision making, hoping you will find something that is riskless. But we all know there is no such thing as a riskless decision because we never know what is coming down the line. So when we have FOBO, the problem is that we end up not taking any decisions and waiting, and then we are stuck. And of course, we see that all the time with governments who, for example, Brexit in the UK, they knew what they needed to do, but it still took 2 prime ministers, 3 deadlines, and 3 elections to actually enact Brexit.
So in your view, can FOMO ever be a positive force in influencing policy direction?
FOMO is great for one reason. It is that it alerts us to opportunity, and it is sort of like the tap on the shoulder to say, you know what? It is worth your time to study, to learn about it, consider doing something. So that is the good part of FOMO. The bad part of FOMO is when a person does not then do the due diligence that's required to say, does this make sense? And that's what we tend to see these days with, for example, AI. People are excited about AI, rightfully so, but in that excitement, they aren't asking the hard questions and saying, how do we do this the right way? Instead, they're moving quickly. And many times, speed comes at the cost of wisdom.
So in your address, you referred and you spoke to this, this FOMI, I think that's how you pronounce it, and you've just alluded to it now,
Yeah.
the fear of missing out when it comes to AI. Now, given the rapid pace of change in areas like artificial intelligence, how should leaders decide when to act and when to wait for more information?
So there are a couple of very simple tests that you can apply, and these are the kinds of things that you could do in your own personal life, by the way, to know whether you have FOMO or not. The first is to say, if I am enacting a policy Am I doing that because I have thought deeply about my objectives and my values, and that is why I'm doing it? Or am I doing it because the country next door has done that thing? And that is it's an easy test. But what we're tending to see with some of these new policies is that one country does something, and then countries that compete with them say, I don't want to fall behind, and they basically copy paste a policy. And so they're not doing the work that our governments are supposed to do, which is to step back and choose wisdom over speed. And so that basic test will keep us out of trouble. At the end of the day, it is the job of policymakers to formulate a thesis, to test that thesis, and then to put something into place that makes sense. And then, of course, over time, adjust that thesis and adjust policy that goes along. If somebody comes in saying they have the right answer before they've gone through that process, we are in an area where FOMO is definitely at play.
As you're speaking, I cannot help but think even of the entire, social media ecosystem and how it has rapidly evolved, where a lot of people, even companies and individuals, seem to be operating on this very paradigm that you are describing. How then does one maintain their identity, their sense of value, and operating from that place of wisdom when it looks like the rest of the world has lost their head?
This is such a fundamental question at the personal level, at the societal level as well, because we're forgetting something that we innately know how to do, but we are distracted by the many stimuli that we receive on a daily basis. What we need to do is get out of the fear place. FOMO is fear-based decision-making. So when we get out of the place of fear and get into the place of facts, we get out of that doom loop. And what tends to happen when we make decisions based on FOMO is that we're way more focused on what we feel that we lack than what we actually have. Like when people feel FOMO because they see a party on Instagram, they're way more focused on, I don't have this thing that I think I want right now. And they're not thinking about all the wonderful things they already do have in their life. So it's a trick that our mind plays on us to focus on scarcity versus abundance. And so what people need to do, and listen, it's a battle that I fight every day in my own life, so I certainly know what it feels like, is when you feel a feeling of FOMO, or you think you do, step back, get away from the screen, take a deep breath and say, what do I really want to do here? What is my objective? What is my goal? Not what that person's doing, not what that country is doing. What is mine? And then once you do that, you can take sensible decisions.
And how can leaders measure whether they are taking and making sensible decisions, or whether they're making decisions out of fear? How do they, get to that place of being able to quantify whether it's FOMO or strategic, wise planning?
Yeah, I mean, it is a great point that you make, because we're not saying, my message here isn't to say to policymakers, don't look at what your fellow countries are doing, or competitors, or your allies. We want to learn from each other. That is one of the beauties of our international system, is that it is a laboratory for new policy that we can learn from. What I am saying is, when you go to make that policy, there is a trade-off between speed and wisdom. And you want to be able to be relevant. You want to move fast enough to be relevant. But if you are moving so fast that you are not incorporating voices that are different than yours, if you're not incorporating expert voices, if you're not questioning your action as you make the plan, then the chances are that you are going to do something that is much more based on the passions of the moment than on a long-term plan of where you want to take your country. And so this, again, comes down to what we want from our policymakers, which is wisdom and gathering data and making decisions that will, in the long term, last and stand the test of time. And so, again, I think it's about bringing together a diverse set of voices, bringing data into the equation, getting out of the fear place, and basing decisions based on facts.
Patrick J. McGinnis, thank you for a very sober and wise conversation today. I think it works on both government level as well as corporate, but even, and perhaps more fundamentally so, on an individual level, because ultimately it is individuals behind both government and corporate. We thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Patrick J. McGinnis. He's a venture capitalist and author of Fear of Missing Out. I tell you what, that book is worth a read.